Hey guys, Michael Corsentino for Shutter Magazine. Welcome to the May 2015 issue. First off, I want to give a big shout out to everyone who came to Shutterfest. I really enjoyed working with all you guys. It was really awesome. And I'm, again, looking forward to next year already. So I hope that you guys were all as inspired as I was. Um, one of the overriding things that I heard and that I hear all the time on the Facebook page and also from students at Shutterfest was that people are having issues or want to get a better understanding of balancing ambient and flash together in the same exposure. So I know we've covered some of that before, and we've talked about doing it in sort of a more dramatic way. This month I want to focus on how to do it and to create soft looking light, to create a natural looking balance between flash and ambient. So in essence, that it really doesn't look like flash is being used. It makes it look like natural light, only better. I think you'll see what I mean when we get into this. So here we're looking at the natural light exposure, and forgive me, I'm zoomed in here on a vertical image, so don't focus on the softness of the image, the lack of tack sharp focus, but really what I wanted to demonstrate here is just our base exposure. And essentially what we're going to do when we're doing this kind of work, or what I like to do, is the first thing I want to do is establish an ambient exposure, and then I want to bring in my flash and dial it in to exactly the level, the amount of flash that I want to create the look that I'm after. So in this case, as we'll dig through the article here, or through the video and the article also, you'll see how we're able to go from this exposure, the ambient exposure, to the ambient and flash exposure and create something really beautiful and really soft, something that looks like it's naturally lit, but it's obviously much more alive than where we started off, which is here. So we're able to really open up the eyes and bring life and excitement to the exposure and to the image. However, we're not overwhelming it with flash. We're not creating something that looks really flashy, which is what I wanted to avoid for this. Is a bridal portrait, and this is what this piece is really all about. It's creating a beautiful bridal portrait, and you can use it for anything, but just to create a natural balance between flash and ambient, natural looking balance between flash and ambient, essentially fill flash, right? So let's take a look at how we dialed in our light. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with that ambient only exposure. As I said in the article, that's going to be your first step. And I do this without turning any strobes on, because basically what you're doing is you're eliminating the variables. If you start with everything on, you really don't know kind of where you're at, and you're sort of dialing one thing up and one thing down, and you're kind of all over the map. This way, you're able to take care of one thing at a time. So you're taking care of the ambient exposure first. Then I'm going to turn on my flash, and here we have an image that is a little bit more dramatic, because we have basically a one-to-one relationship between our flash and our ambient light, or 50% ambient and 50% flash, give or take. I didn't meter this, so I'm not exactly sure where exactly we are in this, but I can tell from looking at this, clearly there's more flash than less. There's a lot more flash, maybe perhaps a little bit ambient light. Than our ambient exposure, but so we're somewhere in the 50-50 range. And then what I was looking for this is our final relationship between flash and ambient. It's going to be that 20% contribution, and I'm going to show you how to get there using a meter. Now, granted, you could just use your shutter speed and your flash power and flash exposure compensation. Well, you use your shutter speed to control the ambient contribution, the amount of ambient light in the exposure, and then you would use your flash power and flash exposure compensation to control the amount of flash being contributed to the exposure. And above your sync speed, you'd either have to switch into high-speed sync or start stopping down your lens to control what's happening with the flash, the amount of flash going on. So, but I want to show you how to do this with a meter. It's really quick and really easy to do it. If you don't have a meter, then of course you can refer to the other articles or the other techniques and just use those. But you end up having to kind of noodle around and chimp a lot. And one of the beautiful things about using a meter is you're able to work accurately and quickly and determine exact percentage of the light. And you know exactly what you're going to be looking for. So again, for this kind of look, I'm looking for a 20% contribution of flash. So 80% of my ambient, 80% of my exposure is made up by ambient light, 20% is made up by flash. And for this kind of fill flash look, you want to be somewhere between 20 and 30%. All right, so let's take a look at how we do that with metering. I'm using the Sekonic L758DR. The DR just means that it's got a built-in radio transmitter, which allows me to trigger pocket wizards. So I've got pocket wizards hooked up to my speed light, because my Canon 600 EXRTs have a sync port built into them. If you don't have a sync port, you can get a little hot shoe attachment that will allow you to put your flash onto this attachment, and then you can put a PC sync cord into that. So there's always a way to do it, and I prefer working wirelessly. You can, of course, have cords running, but they're problematic, prone to failure, and you can also trip over them and everything. So I'm always a big advocate of working wirelessly. So here I am taking that reading, and let's zoom in a little bit so we can get a little bit closer to that, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about here. So here we are, we're looking at a close-up detail shot of the meter, and you can see here that basically what I've done is I've dialed in my shutter speed here, 60th of a second. I've got my aperture here where I want to be, and this is showing me that based on these two settings, the shutter speed and the aperture, that I'm getting 20% exposure, and I'm at ISO 400. So basically I'm going to dial in the shutter speed that I want, and then I'm going to take a reading, and it's going to tell me, oh, at f4.2 I'm at 20% flash power. That's the amount, and I can dial that up or down, or I can change my f-stop, whatever I want to do to kind of find that where I want to be with my aperture based on how much flash power that I want, and then I can dial up or down the flash to get to where I want to be. So let's just dial back out. And again, this really is what we're looking for, is that that number. We're looking for that. Again, between 20 and 30% is what we're going to be looking for. So again, I want to go through the various steps that we went through here and just show you a little bit more, a close-up version of the change in the lighting. So when we're bringing in flash, when we're moving from ambient only to flash and creating that natural fill flash look. So here we are, we've got ambient only. Again, this is going to be your first step. We're setting up everything. We haven't turned any lights on. This is what happens when we introduce our flash. Again, we haven't really dialed it in. This is just my first starting point. And I can see here for this particular look that I'm after, it's too much. It's too flashy. It's too contrasty. There's too much, the specular highlights here and here. I'm not liking. It's really hot here, and there's all this going on here. I'm not just loving the look for this. It might work perfectly for something more dramatic, but in this instance, I want to create something very soft and very flattering for our bride. This is what happens when we just work with that really soft 20% amount of flash. So this, you can see the difference. It's all just about how much flash I'm contributing to the exposure and how much ambient I'm contributing to the exposure. So again, just to reiterate, 80% from ambient light, 20 to 30% from flash is going to give you a nice natural fill flash kind of looks. And you can see here, and you can see here that some of those problems that we were having before, some of those issues have now been resolved. We no longer have those highlights here, you know, in a contrast here. We still have highlights, but they're very soft and they're very flattering. All of this stuff is now, we're not clipping our highlights. Everything looks good. And I think it's a much softer, much more pleasing kind of look, aesthetic for this particular sort of look, right? So there's another thing that I did here, and that's another key part of this, is something called feathering. We talked about this in the article, and I just want to dig a little bit deeper here. So basically, feathering allows you to position your light in such a way, and the modifier in such a way, that you are working with the edge of the light. So you can see here we're using Elastilite Octabank on an extension pole, and we've got a speed light here. And you can see here that Jonathan is angling this light away, that we're basically working with the edge of the light in relationship to Ashley. So that light is almost kind of moving past her. So let's dig a little deeper on this. I want to show you the face of an Octabank and exactly how feathering works and why we want to do it to create a softer quality of light. when we're working with an Octabank or a softbox or any kind of light, but it's more evident when you're working with a softbox. You've got an edge that you're working with here, okay? And you also have the center of the softbox, and this is where the light is. Right back here, we can see it here. It's pointing to the center, and that center is our hotspot, and that's going to be true of a strobe or a speed light or whatever lighting instrument you're working with, okay? So as we move away from that hotspot, as we move away from that center out, we start to feather our light. We start to work within the feathered range of that light, a softer, more diffuse part of that light. Light is still happening all the way along here, but it's much, much softer, right? So for feathering, you really want to work with the edge of your light. And that's key. That working with the edge of your light is just going to give you that beautiful, soft quality of light. And you really can't beat it. So there's our softbox, our Octabank. And you can see here that now we have not angled our light away. We haven't angled our Octabank. So we're getting the brunt of that light right there. And that is just like really harsh. But if we take that and we angle it, all of a sudden we've got a much softer light. We're angling that light past Ashley, and we're just kind of catching everything that's going on here and here, right? But we're not getting this. We're not getting that direct, harsh center light, which is really what you want to try and avoid if you're looking for a softer light. I avoid it a lot. I mean, even if I'm using more contribution of flash, based on to the ambient and flash ratio, I want, I don't want such a specular look on the highlights. So here I'm able, even if I was using more flash here, I'd still be able to avoid a lot of those hot spots by working in that zone, that feathered zone of the light, all of this stuff happening here. So you're going to get beautiful light when you feather it. So definitely try feathering. It's really helpful, right? So let's look a little bit at the gear that was used for this shoot. Again, when you're doing bridal work, you're doing weddings, portability is key. So the Last-A-Light range of products, and again, there are, I don't want this to be a Last-A-Light commercial. There are a million different ways of products to use and stuff, but this is just what I happen to use. And the reasons that I love this gear is because it's portable. It's all this stuff collapses. The Octabank collapses and folds down to a small, disc-sized bag, and you can carry it around. It's really lightweight. The bracket, same thing, kind of nests into the bag. It allows you to hold 2 speed lights, which is really great if you find yourself needing to work in high-speed sync. Oftentimes you're going to need more power because you lose a lot of power when you work in high-speed sync. So if you're looking to use those higher shutter speeds, having a bracket that's going to allow you to work with more than one speed light is definitely advantageous. And then over here, all the way on the right, we see this extension pole, and this is a non-rotating pole, which is one of the reasons I like it. It's not going to, since it's top-weighted, that softbox is not going to spin around on you. So wherever you aim it, it's going to go, and that's especially important when you're feathering. So anyway, if you're interested, take a look. These are the products that I used for this shoot. And that's pretty much going to wrap it up. Feathered light, and a 20 to 30% contribution of flash to ambient is it's going to allow you to go from an ambient exposure like this to an exposure like that, which is lit, but it doesn't look lit. It looks very natural. It looks very open. We're always trying to find open shade when we're looking for softer lighting, but you can see how open shade alone, while it gives you a good quality of light, it's a very flat light. It's a very kind of dull light. In this case, it doesn't have a lot of color to it. When we introduce a strobe in just a nice small amount and a feathered amount, we're able to create a gorgeous, soft portrait. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this month. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Definitely get out there and try working with flash and ambient. They're easier to balance than you think. Just always remember you're working with 2 zones of light, and you're going to control them independently. All right, well, until next month, we'll see you next time. This has been Michael Corsentino for Shutter Magazine.